I'm Jessica Miller, 34, and I just watched my sister turn ghost white as her little power play collapsed spectacularly. For 3 years, I lived in her building, paying fair rent while rebuilding my life after divorce. Yesterday, she ambushed me with a rent increase from $2,200 to $6,800 monthly, smirking the entire time. Market rate, she claimed. What she didn't know, I purchased the building 6 months ago through my company. The look on her face when I slid the property deed across the table? Absolutely priceless. Hey everyone! Before I dive deeper into this family drama that shook my world, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If you enjoy real-life family revenge stories like mine, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more jaw-dropping tales of betrayal and justice. Trust me, what happens next in this sisterly showdown will make your jaw drop. Now, let's get into how this all started. My relationship with my sister Rachel had always been complicated. 3 years older than me, Rachel grew up being the successful sibling, at least according to our parents. While I pursued a creative career in graphic design, Rachel went into real estate and property management, earning our father's endless praise. "Why can't you be practical like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my teenage years. When my marriage to Daniel fell apart after 8 years, I found myself emotionally devastated and financially vulnerable. Despite our strained relationship, Rachel offered me an apartment in a building she managed in downtown Chicago. The rent was reasonable at $2,200 per month for a 2-bedroom unit, slightly below market rate, a fact she never let me forget. "I'm doing you a huge favor," she'd remind me monthly. What Rachel didn't realize was that my design business had actually been thriving before my divorce. The financial hit came from the legal battle with Daniel, who tried to claim partial ownership of my company despite having nothing to do with it. After the dust settled, I was cash poor but with a growing client base that included several major corporate accounts. I appreciated having a stable place to live while rebuilding my savings, though Rachel's condescending attitude made it difficult to feel genuine gratitude. She'd drop by unannounced for inspections, criticize my decor choices, and remind me that normal tenants wouldn't get such lenient treatment. "Family discount," she'd say with a tight smile. Over the following 3 years, I kept my head down and worked relentlessly. My business expanded to the point where I needed to hire 3 full-time designers and an administrative assistant. I opened a proper office space downtown and landed contracts with national brands. Through careful investments and disciplined saving, my financial situation improved dramatically, though I kept this information private from my family. Rachel, meanwhile, continued her pattern of one-upmanship. At every family gathering, she'd find ways to highlight her success and diminish mine. When I mentioned a new client, she'd counter with stories about multi-million-dollar properties she was managing. When our parents asked about my business, she'd interject with, "It's cute how Jessica's little design thing is working out, but real wealth is in real estate." Last year, I learned through industry connections that the property management company Rachel worked for was facing financial difficulties. The building where I lived, along with several others in their portfolio, would likely be sold to cover mounting debts. This information wasn't public yet, but my client, a financial consultant for real estate investments, had insider knowledge. An idea began forming in my mind. After consulting with financial advisors and lawyers, I established a property holding company using my middle name and my mother's maiden name, Lynn Anderson Properties. With the profits from my design business and a business loan secured against my company's future earnings, I positioned myself to make an offer when the building came on the market. The sale happened quietly, without public listing. Through my connections, I presented a competitive offer through my holding company and closed the deal 6 months ago. Rachel had no idea the building had changed hands. Her company still managed the property, but she now reported to my corporation rather than her previous bosses. I decided to keep this information to myself, curious to see how long it would take her to discover the truth. During these 6 months, I meticulously documented every interaction with Rachel in her capacity as property manager. I noted her unprofessional conduct, unauthorized entries to my apartment, and disparaging comments about other tenants. I spoke with longtime residents and collected statements about their experiences, all while Rachel remained completely oblivious to the fact that she was now essentially working for her younger sister. The stage was perfectly set for a confrontation I never actively sought, but deep down, I'd been preparing for my entire adult life, a chance to finally stand on equal ground with the sister who had always looked down on me. I had no idea that Rachel would orchestrate her own downfall so spectacularly, or that the reckoning would come quite so soon. But when it did, I was more than ready. Last Sunday started like any other weekend day. I was enjoying my morning coffee while reviewing design mock-ups for a new client when my doorbell rang. Rachel stood in the hallway, designer handbag dangling from her arm, a folder tucked under her elbow, and that familiar look of superiority plastered across her face. "We need to talk about your lease," she announced, brushing past me into my apartment without waiting for an invitation. This was typical Rachel behavior. Boundaries had never been her strong suit. "Good morning to you too," I said, closing the door behind her. "What about my lease?" "It's not up for renewal for another 4 months." Rachel placed the folder on my kitchen counter and extracted a document with the property management company's letterhead. "There's been a change in policy. All tenants are being brought up to current market rates effective next month." I picked up the paper and scanned it. Sure enough, the document outlined a rent increase from my current $2,200 to a staggering $6,800 per month, more than triple what I had been paying. "This is ridiculous," I said, keeping my voice even despite the anger bubbling inside me. "You can't triple someone's rent with only 30 days' notice. That's not legal." Rachel's smile tightened. "Actually, I can. The fine print in your lease allows for rate adjustments with 30 days' notice. You should have read it more carefully before signing." She wasn't wrong about the clause. I had noticed it when I signed the lease years ago, but assumed my sister would never invoke such a predatory provision against family. Clearly, I had overestimated Rachel's sense of loyalty. "This is how the real world works, Jess," she continued, examining her manicured nails. "The building's value has increased significantly, and we can't keep subsidizing your lifestyle. If you can't afford it, perhaps it's time to find something more, within your means." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. Rachel had always viewed my career choices as inferior, my success as minimal compared to hers. She had no idea that my little design thing now generated 7-figure annual revenues. "What about other tenants?" I asked, genuinely concerned about the elderly couple down the hall who had lived in the building for decades. "Are their rents being tripled too?" Rachel waved her hand dismissively. "That's confidential information. But let's just say everyone's rates are being adjusted appropriately." "This feels targeted, Rachel. Like you're specifically trying to force me out." Her facade cracked slightly, revealing a glimpse of the resentment she'd harbored for years. "Don't be dramatic. This is business, not personal. Though I do think it's time you stopped relying on family connections and stood on your own 2 feet." The irony of her statement nearly made me laugh. For years, she had lorded her generosity over me, creating a narrative where I was the struggling younger sister dependent on her charity. This rent increase wasn't just about money, it was about power. Rachel needed to reinforce her position of superiority, completely unaware that the dynamic had already shifted beneath her feet. "I'll need time to think about this," I said, placing the document back on the counter. "There's nothing to think about," Rachel replied. "Either pay the new rate starting next month or give notice. Those are your options." She gathered her things and headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Mom and Dad are expecting us for dinner on Friday. Try not to mention this, you know how they worry about you." After Rachel left, I sat at my kitchen table, the rent increase notice mocking me from the counter. I could easily afford the new rate, but that wasn't the point. This was a blatant abuse of power, and not just against me. If other tenants were facing similar increases, many would be forced out of their homes. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Harrington, the elderly tenant from the 5th floor. "Jessica, dear, how are you?" he answered in his gentle, wavering voice. "I'm well, Mr. Harrington. I'm calling because I wanted to ask if you've received any notice about a rent increase recently." The silence on the other end confirmed my suspicion before he spoke. "Yes, just yesterday. It's quite shocking, almost double what we're paying now. Margaret is beside herself with worry. We've lived here for 27 years, but I don't see how we can stay. My blood boiled. Rachel wasn't just coming after me, she was displacing vulnerable long-time tenants to maximize profits. This wasn't business, it was cruelty disguised as capitalism. Over the next few days, I spoke with several other tenants in the building. All had received increased notices, though none as extreme as mine. It became clear that Rachel was using her position to systematically push out existing tenants in favor of wealthier newcomers who would pay premium rates. What she didn't know was that her plan was about to backfire spectacularly. By Thursday evening, I had assembled all the documentation needed for the confrontation with Rachel. Property deeds, tenant complaints, financial records, everything was organized in a sleek black portfolio. I had also consulted with my attorney to ensure I understood all legal implications of what I was about to do. The next morning, I called Rachel's office and requested an urgent meeting regarding my rent increase. Her assistant initially tried to schedule me for the following week, but I insisted it couldn't wait. Reluctantly, she squeezed me in for a 2 p.m. appointment. Rachel's office was exactly what you'd expect: minimalist, expensive, and designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a stunning view of the Chicago skyline, a not-so-subtle reminder of her position of power. She sat behind an enormous glass desk, barely looking up from her computer when I entered. "I only have 15 minutes, she said curtly. "Have you decided whether you're paying the new rate or moving out?" "Actually," I replied, settling into the chair opposite her desk, "I'd like to discuss a third option." That got her attention. Rachel looked up, eyebrow raised. "There is no third option." I placed my portfolio on her desk and smiled. "Before we get into that, I'm curious about something. When did you learn the building had been sold?" Confusion flickered across her face. "What are you talking about? The building hasn't been sold." "Actually, it was 6 months ago." I pulled out the property deed and slid it across the desk. "Lynn Anderson Properties purchased it last April." Rachel snatched up the document, her eyes scanning the page rapidly. "This must be a mistake. I would have been notified if the building changed hands." Upper management kept it quiet. They didn't want to cause panic among the property managers whose positions might be affected by the transition. Her face paled slightly as the implications began to dawn on her. "How do you know all this?" The moment had arrived, the culmination of months of planning and years of enduring Rachel's condescension. I leaned forward, maintaining perfect composure. "I know because I'm Lynn Anderson. Or rather, Lynn is my middle name and Anderson is Mom's maiden name. I bought the building, Rachel. I'm your boss." For several seconds, Rachel just stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Then she laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that held no humor. "That's ridiculous. You couldn't afford to buy a building like this." I withdrew more documents from my portfolio: bank statements, the closing paperwork, the business registration for Lynn Anderson Properties. One by one, I placed them on her desk, creating an undeniable paper trail of ownership. My design business has been quite profitable for some time now. That little hobby you've been dismissing paid for this building. And several others, actually. Rachel's face transitioned from disbelief to shock to a sickly pallor. She rifled through the documents frantically, searching for some loophole, some mistake that would restore her position of superiority. She found none. This is some kind of trick," she stammered. "It's not a trick. It's business," I replied, echoing her earlier sentiment. "And speaking of business, I've been reviewing your performance as property manager." I extracted a folder containing tenant complaints, documentation of Rachel's unauthorized entries to units, and evidence of her discriminatory pricing strategies. Her eyes widened as she realized the extent of my knowledge. "You've been collecting information against me? Your own sister. Just documenting facts. The same way you've been documenting my supposed failures for years." I paused, letting the gravity of the situation sink in. "The question now is, where do we go from here?" Rachel's shock was beginning to morph into anger, her default response when cornered. "You did this to humiliate me. You've been planning this for months, waiting to ambush me." "Actually, I did it because it was a sound investment." The humiliation part is entirely of your own making. If you had treated me and the other tenants with basic respect, we wouldn't be having this conversation. She pushed back from her desk and stood, her body rigid with fury. You had no right to go behind my back like this. And you had no right to triple my rent out of spite, I countered calmly. Or to threaten elderly tenants with homelessness to pad your commission. Rachel paced behind her desk, her designer heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floor. So what now? You fire me? Throw me out on the street? Is that your grand revenge plan? I closed my portfolio and stood to meet her gaze. That depends entirely on you. Unlike some people, I don't believe in using power to hurt family. For the first time in our adult lives, Rachel looked at me not with condescension, but with uncertainty. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably, and we both knew it. Whatever happened next would establish the pattern for our relationship moving forward, if there was to be a relationship at all. Sit down, Rachel, I said, my voice quiet but firm. We need to have a real conversation for once. After a moment's hesitation, she sank back into her chair, visibly struggling to process this new reality. Gone was the smug property manager who delighted in lording her authority over me. In her place sat a woman confronting the consequences of years of arrogance. You could have told me, she said finally. You didn't have to create this elaborate scheme just to humiliate me. This wasn't about humiliation, I replied, taking my seat again. And it wasn't a scheme. It was a business decision that I chose to keep private. Which, by the way, is my right. Just as it was your company's right not to announce the sale to all employees immediately. Rachel's jaw tightened. So what happens now? You've made your point. You've shown you're more successful than anyone gave you credit for. What do you want from me? First, all rent increase notices are being rescinded, I stated. Every single one. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington on the 5th floor are not going to spend their retirement years searching for affordable housing because you decided to double their rent overnight. That will impact revenue projections, Rachel protested weakly. I'm well aware. I've reviewed the financials. The building is already profitable at current rates. I leaned forward. Second, we need to discuss your role moving forward. Rachel's posture stiffened. You're firing me. I didn't say that. I'm evaluating whether you're the right person to manage this property based on your track record and approach to tenant relations. This is personal, and you know it, she snapped. No, Rachel. This is business, your favorite justification for treating people poorly. I opened my portfolio again and extracted performance metrics I'd compiled. Tenant turnover under your management is 38% higher than the industry average. Maintenance requests take an average of 12 days longer to fulfill than in comparable buildings. Tenant satisfaction scores are in the bottom quartile. Rachel glared at me. Those numbers don't tell the whole story. You're right. They don't. I pulled out a stack of statements from current and former tenants. These fill in the gaps. Complaints about unprofessional conduct, playing favorites with certain tenants, ignoring repair requests from others. One family moved out after you suggested their ethnic cooking was devaluing the property. Rachel's face flushed. That's not what I said. I simply mentioned that strong cooking odors were a concern for neighboring units. I have it in writing, Rachel. Your exact words were documented in their complaint to the management company. I closed the folder. The pattern is clear. You abuse your position, particularly with tenants you perceive as beneath you socially or economically. For a moment, silence hung between us. Through the large windows behind Rachel, I could see clouds gathering over the Chicago skyline, mirroring the storm brewing in her office. So this is revenge, she said finally. For all the times I supposedly mistreated you growing up. I sighed, feeling suddenly exhausted by the decades-long competition she'd created between us. This isn't about our childhood, Rachel. It's about who you are now as a professional and as a person. The fact that you immediately frame this as revenge rather than accountability says everything about your perspective. Rachel stood up again, unable to remain still under the weight of these revelations. You've always been jealous of me. Always trying to prove yourself to Mom and Dad. This whole thing, buying the building, collecting evidence against me, it's all about showing them you're better than me. Our parents have nothing to do with this, I replied calmly. They don't even know I bought the building. They will after tonight's dinner, Rachel threatened, a glimpse of her usual tactics showing through. That's fine, I said with a shrug. I have nothing to hide. But before you start crafting your narrative for them, there's something else you should know. Rachel crossed her arms defensively. What? I've purchased 3 other properties from your company's portfolio in the past year, all through different subsidiaries of my holding company. The color drained from Rachel's face for the second time that day. You're lying. I pulled out more documentation, property deeds for buildings in River North, Lincoln Park, and Wicker Park. All former holdings of her management company, all now owned by corporations that ultimately traced back to me. Why would you do this? She whispered, genuine confusion in her voice. Initially? Because they were sound investments available at below market rates due to your company's financial troubles. I gathered the papers and returned them to my portfolio. But as I reviewed the management practices, a disturbing pattern emerged across all properties under your supervision. This isn't just about our building, Rachel. It's systematic. Her hands trembled slightly as she processed the full scope of the situation. Not only had her power play against me backfired spectacularly, but her entire professional reputation was now in my hands. What are you going to do? She asked, vulnerability replacing anger in her voice. I considered my sister carefully. Despite everything, we shared blood, history, parents. The hurt between us ran deep in both directions. That depends on you, I said finally. I'm prepared to offer you a choice. What kind of choice? Suspicion laced her words. Option 1. You can resign from your position with a reasonable severance package. I'll provide a neutral reference for future employment, and we can tell the family whatever story preserves your dignity. Rachel's eyes narrowed. And option 2. You can stay on as property manager, but under new terms. Complete transparency. Fair treatment of all tenants. No more unauthorized entries, no more discriminatory practices. You'll report directly to my company's chief operations officer with quarterly performance reviews. Working for my little sister, she said bitterly. Working for Lynn Anderson Properties, I corrected. With the opportunity to rebuild your professional reputation on a foundation of actual competence rather than intimidation. Rachel turned to gaze out at the darkening sky, her silhouette framed against gathering storm clouds. I could see the struggle playing out within her. Pride warring with practicality, anger with opportunity. Hey everyone, I know you're probably on the edge of your seat right now, wondering what my sister decided. I still remember the tension in that office, the weight of years of competition and resentment hanging between us. Before I reveal her choice and what happened next, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fired your sister outright or given her a second chance? Drop your opinion in the comments below. If you're enjoying this family drama roller coaster, please hit that like button, it really helps the channel. And if you want to know whether justice was served in this sister showdown, make sure you stick around for the rest of the story. Now, let's see what Rachel decided. I need time to think, she said finally, turning back to face me. You have until the end of next week, I replied, standing to leave. And Rachel? The rent increases are canceled immediately. I'll be personally contacting each tenant to inform them. As I walked toward the door, Rachel called after me. What about your rent? Are you going to keep paying anything at all? I paused, hand on the doorknob. I'll continue paying my current rate, the fair market value we both agreed to 3 years ago. And will you tell the other tenants that their landlord has been living among them all this time? A hint of her old spite colored the question. That's not relevant to them. What matters is that their homes are secure and properly maintained. I looked back at my sister, seeing beyond the designer clothes and carefully constructed facade to the insecurity that had always driven her. We're having dinner with Mom and Dad tonight. I suggest we keep business discussions separate from family time. Rachel laughed hollowly. As if that's possible now. It's always been possible, Rachel. You're the one who consistently blurred the lines. With that, I left her office, closing the door quietly behind me. The skies opened up as I walked to my car, rain pouring down in sheets that matched my emotional release. 3 years of planning, of careful positioning, had culminated in this confrontation. I hadn't sought revenge, exactly, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction of finally standing my ground against my sister's lifetime of condescension. As I drove through the stormy Chicago streets toward my apartment, in my building, I wondered about the coming family dinner and what it would reveal about the true nature of the bonds between us all. That evening, I arrived at our parents' suburban home precisely at 7 p.m. The familiar scent of Mom's pot roast filled the air as I stepped through the front door, momentarily transporting me back to simpler times before adult complications had magnified the childhood tensions between Rachel and me. "Jessica, sweetheart." My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She embraced me warmly, then held me at arm's length to examine me. "You look tired. Are you working too hard again?" "I'm fine, Mom," I assured her, handing over the bottle of wine I'd brought. "Just a busy week." "Your sister called," Dad announced from his recliner in the living room. "She's running late. Said she had some emergency at work to handle." I nodded, unsurprised. Rachel was undoubtedly scrambling to process the day's revelations and determine her approach for the family dinner. Part of me wondered if she would show up at all. "How's business?" Dad asked as I settled onto the couch opposite him. His question seemed innocent enough, but I detected the usual undercurrent of skepticism he reserved for my career choices. "It's excellent, actually," I replied. "We landed 3 new corporate clients last month, and we're expanding the office." Dad nodded, a non-committal gesture I'd grown accustomed to over the years. "That's nice. Your sister just closed a deal on a luxury condo development downtown. 7 figures in commissions." And there it was, the comparison I'd been subject to my entire life. Before I could respond, the front door opened and Rachel appeared. Her usual polished appearance seemed slightly frayed around the edges, her eyes revealing the strain of our earlier confrontation despite her attempt at a composed facade. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, kissing our mother's cheek and handing her an elaborate floral arrangement. Absolute madness at the office today. Our eyes met briefly across the living room, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. The tension was palpable, though only we understood its source. Dinner proceeded with forced normalcy. Mom updated us on neighborhood gossip, Dad complained about property taxes and Rachel, and I participated with careful politeness. Neither of us mentioned our confrontation or the buildings now connecting our professional lives. It wasn't until dessert, Mom's famous apple pie, that Rachel finally broached the subject, though obliquely. "I've been thinking about career changes," she announced, causing our father to look up sharply from his pie. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "You're at the top of your field. Why would you change now?" Rachel glanced at me before responding. "I'm not at the top, Dad. There's always someone higher up the ladder." Mom looked concerned. "Is everything all right at work, dear?" "It's fine," Rachel replied quickly. "I'm just reevaluating some things. Considering whether my current approach is sustainable." Dad frowned. "This doesn't sound like you, Rachel. You've always known exactly what you wanted and how to get it." "Maybe what I wanted wasn't what I needed," she said quietly. Our parents exchanged confused glances, clearly sensing the undercurrents, but unable to decipher them. I remained silent, allowing Rachel the space to navigate this moment in her own way. "Jessica's business is doing well," Mom said, clearly attempting to change the subject to safer territory. "She was just telling us about her new clients." Rachel nodded. "Yes, I've heard her company is quite successful now. More than any of us realized." I caught the double meaning in her words and the questioning look our father shot between us. "Your sister has always been creative," he said, his tone suggesting creativity was a consolation prize rather than a valuable skill. "But real estate is where the serious money is." I couldn't help but smile. "Actually, Dad, real estate and creative businesses aren't mutually exclusive. Many designers branch into property investment once they have the capital." "Is that what you're doing?" Mom asked, genuine interest in her voice. "Investing in property." Before I could answer, Rachel interjected. "Jessica owns several buildings in prime Chicago locations, including the one I manage." Her voice was controlled, but I detected notes of both resentment and reluctant respect. The stunned silence that followed was broken only by the clatter of our father's fork against his plate. "What?" "It's true," I confirmed, meeting my father's incredulous stare. "My design business has been very profitable." I've diversified into real estate investment over the past few years. But, but that takes millions, Dad sputtered. How could you possibly? I've been underestimated for a long time, I said simply. By everyone at this table. That ends now. Mom reached for my hand across the table, her eyes brimming with a mixture of confusion and pride. Why didn't you tell us, honey? Because I needed to prove it to myself first, I replied honestly. And because every accomplishment I've ever shared has been diminished in comparison to Rachel's. That's not true, Dad protested weakly, but the guilty flush creeping up his neck suggested otherwise. Rachel studied her wine glass intently. It is true, Dad. You've always favored me because I followed your path. You never gave Jessica credit for forging her own. Our parents looked between us, decades of family dynamics suddenly exposed in the harsh light of truth. The apple pie lay forgotten as the conversation I'd avoided for years finally unfolded. I never meant to make you feel less valued, Dad said quietly after a long pause. I just wanted you to be secure. Real estate seemed safer than design. I am secure, I assured him. More than secure. But it took me believing in myself when no one else did to get here. Rachel pushed her chair back abruptly. I need some air. She walked out to the back patio, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. Should I? Mom gestured toward the door. Let me, I said, standing to follow my sister. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. Rachel stood at the railing, staring into the darkness of our parents' backyard. She didn't turn when I joined her, but her posture acknowledged my presence. You could have destroyed me today, she said finally. You had every reason to. That was never my goal. Then what was? To humiliate me? To prove you're better? I sighed, leaning against the railing beside her. To be seen, Rachel. To have my worth acknowledged by you, by our parents, and mostly by myself. She turned to face me then, moonlight illuminating the tears tracking silently down her cheeks. I've been awful to you. Yes, I agreed. You have. And now you have all the power. You can fire me, evict me from my apartment, ruin my reputation in the industry. I don't want power over you, I said quietly. I never did. I want us to see each other as equals. As sisters. Rachel wiped at her tears impatiently. How can we ever be just sisters after today? That's up to you, I told her. I've made my choice. I'm offering you a second chance professionally and a first chance at a real relationship between us. What happens next depends on whether you can accept that the dynamic has changed forever. She was silent for a long moment, processing my words. When she spoke again, her voice held a vulnerability I'd never heard before. I don't know if I know how to be your equal, she admitted. I've defined myself by being better than you for so long. Then maybe it's time to redefine yourself, I suggested gently. Starting with how you treat the tenants in our buildings. Rachel looked up sharply. Our buildings. If you choose to stay on as property manager under the new terms, yes. We'll be partners in this, not adversaries. The patio door slid open behind us and Mom's voice called softly, everything okay out here? Rachel and I exchanged a look, one that acknowledged the complexity of the question and the journey ahead of us. We're working on it, Mom, Rachel answered, never breaking eye contact with me. For the first time, I think we really are. 1 month after the confrontation in Rachel's office, I sat in the community room of our apartment building, surrounded by tenants gathered for the first ever Residents Advisory Council meeting. The concept had been Rachel's idea, a forum where tenants could voice concerns, suggest improvements, and participate in building decisions. I call this meeting to order, Rachel announced from the front of the room. Gone was the intimidating property manager of old, replaced by a more approachable version who had spent the past weeks personally apologizing to tenants for past behavior. Mr. Harrington raised his hand. First, I want to thank management for canceling those outrageous rent increases. My Margaret and I were pricing out assisted living facilities before we got the news. Rachel nodded, accepting the implied criticism with grace that would have been unthinkable a month ago. That decision was misguided, and I apologize for the stress it caused. This building's value isn't just financial, it's in the community of people who live here. I watched from the back of the room as my sister guided the meeting with surprising skill, taking notes on maintenance concerns, scheduling follow-up inspections, and genuinely listening to tenant suggestions. When Mrs. Lopez from the third floor mentioned the need for better lighting in the laundry room, Rachel didn't dismiss her as she might have previously. Instead, she asked for specific recommendations and promised next-day action. The transformation wasn't just professional. Rachel had accepted my offer to remain as property manager under new terms, and over the past 4 weeks, we had begun the painstaking process of rebuilding our relationship as sisters. Weekly coffee meetings, initially stiff and awkward, had gradually evolved into genuine conversations. After the tenant meeting concluded, Rachel approached me as residents filtered out of the community room. "What did you think? Too much hand-holding or not enough?" "You found the right balance," I assured her. "They seemed genuinely surprised by your interest in their concerns." She winced. "That's a polite way of saying I was terrible before." "You were," I agreed, but without malice. "The important thing is you're changing." We walked together toward the building's small courtyard garden, another improvement Rachel had implemented after tenants requested more outdoor gathering space. "The quarterly financials came in," Rachel said as we settled on a bench amid blooming flowers. "Revenue is actually up, despite canceling the rent increases." "How's that possible?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Lower turnover means fewer vacant units and reduced marketing costs. And 3 new tenants chose us over competitors specifically because of our community approach." She handed me a tablet with the financial reports. "We're spending more on maintenance and improvements, but making it back in retention and reputation." I scrolled through the numbers, impressed by the careful analysis. "This is excellent work." "I've been thinking about what you said about redefining myself," Rachel admitted. "It's not easy after spending my entire adult life believing success meant dominating others." "The best business relationships aren't about domination," I pointed out. "They're about mutual benefit. The tenants are happier, the building is running better, and the financials prove it's working." Rachel nodded slowly. "Dad called yesterday. He wants to have lunch to discuss investment opportunities." She made air quotes around the last words. "First time he's ever asked for my input rather than just telling me what to do." "Are you going to meet him?" "I suggested he invite both of us," she replied. "Said we come as a package deal now." The significance of this wasn't lost on me. Rachel had always jealously guarded her relationship with our father, positioning herself as his favorite and natural successor. Sharing that connection represented a fundamental shift in her thinking. He was surprised, she continued with a small smile. "But he agreed. We're meeting next Tuesday." "Lunch with the 2 most stubborn people I know," I groaned. "Should I bring a referee whistle?" Rachel laughed, a genuine sound I'd rarely heard from her. "Might not be a bad idea. But I think it'll be different this time. You standing up to me, it helped me see I could stand up to him too." We sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching a butterfly flit between the newly planted flowers. The metaphor wasn't lost on either of us. "I've been looking at the Wicker Park property," Rachel said finally. "The management is abysmal, but the building has potential. If we applied what we're learning here." I asked, raising an eyebrow. "If you want," she backtracked quickly. "It's your building, obviously." "No, I assured her. "Partners?" Rachel extended her hand formally, but her eyes held genuine warmth. "Partners." As we shook hands in the garden we'd created together, I reflected on how different this outcome was from what I'd imagined when I purchased the building. I hadn't sought revenge, exactly, but I had wanted justice, for myself and for the tenants Rachel had mistreated. What I'd found instead was something more valuable, a chance to heal the relationship that had shaped both our lives, for better and worse. The real victory wasn't in the confrontation or in watching Rachel face the consequences of her actions. It was in what came after, the difficult, rewarding work of transformation, not just for Rachel but for both of us. I was no longer the overshadowed younger sister with something to prove, and she was no longer the domineering force with something to protect. Together, we were building something neither of us could have created alone. 1 year after I revealed my ownership of the building to Rachel, we stood together in the rooftop garden we'd created atop our flagship property. What had once been a barren maintenance space was now a thriving community area, complete with vegetable beds tended by tenants, comfortable seating areas, and stunning views of the Chicago skyline. Below us, residents gathered for the building's first anniversary celebration, an event that symbolized not just a year of new management, but the birth of a genuine community. "Remember when you threatened to triple my rent?" I asked Rachel, handing her a glass of champagne from the refreshment table. She winced dramatically. "Can we please never mention that again?" "Not my finest moment." "I don't know," I teased. "It led to all this." I gestured at the flourishing rooftop and the happy residents below. "True," Rachel acknowledged. "Though I maintain there could have been an easier path than humiliating me in my own office." "You needed the wake-up call," I replied. "And I needed to stand my ground." We clinked glasses, our relationship now strong enough to revisit the confrontation with humor rather than pain. The past year had brought changes neither of us could have predicted. Lynn Anderson Properties, now openly co-managed by the Miller sisters, had expanded to include 12 buildings across Chicago's most desirable neighborhoods. Our reputation for fair pricing, responsive management, and community focus had made us the exception in a market often criticized for predatory practices. More importantly, our family dynamics had undergone a profound transformation. Dad, initially shocked by my financial success and Rachel's partnership with me, had gradually come to respect our business model. Mom had blossomed once the competitive tension between her daughters dissipated, revealing a warm, funny woman who'd been sidelined by decades of family drama. Mr. Harrington approached us, his wife Margaret on his arm. "The garden looks magnificent, ladies. Those tomato plants I started are coming along nicely." "We couldn't have done it without your expertise," Rachel told him sincerely. A year ago, she wouldn't have acknowledged a tenant's contribution, let alone expressed gratitude for it. "Will you be at the city council meeting next week?" Margaret asked. "They're discussing those rent control measures you helped draft." I nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." The proposal has support from both tenant advocates and ethical landlords. That's a coalition they can't easily dismiss. After the Harringtons moved on to enjoy the celebration, Rachel turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Did you ever imagine we'd be housing policy advocates?" "Dad must be having an aneurysm." "Actually, I think he's secretly proud," I replied. "He called me yesterday to discuss the proposal. Said it was unexpectedly reasonable." "High praise from Richard Miller," Rachel laughed. "Next thing you know, he'll be admitting your design business was a valid career choice all along." "Let's not get carried away," I joked. "Some miracles take more than a year." As the sun began to set over Chicago, casting a golden glow across our rooftop sanctuary, Rachel grew serious. "I never properly thanked you." "For what?" "For not firing me when you had every reason to. For giving me a chance to become someone I could actually respect." She looked out over the city, her profile softened in the evening light. "I was so focused on proving my worth through power that I became someone I didn't like very much." "I think we both needed to break free from the roles we'd been assigned," I reflected. "You as the successful, practical sister, me as the struggling creative one." Neither was ever fully true. "Well, you certainly shattered my illusions with that property deed," Rachel said, nudging my shoulder playfully. "Sometimes the most powerful move isn't a dramatic confrontation," I replied. "It's simply revealing your true strength when others have underestimated you." Rachel raised her glass. "To underestimation, then, the secret weapon of patient people everywhere." As we toasted, I caught sight of a young woman watching us from across the rooftop. She approached hesitantly, clutching a portfolio similar to the one I'd carried into Rachel's office a year ago. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Jessica and Rachel Miller?" "I'm Zoe Alvarez. I'm a student at the Art Institute, and I've been following your work, both the design firm and your property management philosophy. I was wondering if your internship program is still accepting applications for fall." Rachel and I exchanged glances, a wordless communication passing between us. "We're always looking for talented people who understand both the creative and practical sides of business," I told her. "Why don't you join us down at the community celebration? You can tell us more about your interests." As we escorted Zoe downstairs, introducing her to tenants and team members, I felt a profound sense of completion. The story that had begun with betrayal and power plays had evolved into something neither Rachel nor I could have envisioned, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that true strength lies not in dominating others, but in helping them thrive alongside you. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down and residents returned to their homes that were secure, well-maintained, and truly theirs, Rachel and I stood alone in the building's lobby. "Do you ever regret buying this place?" she asked suddenly, given all the drama it caused initially. I considered the question carefully. Not for a second. Some lessons can only be learned through conflict. Some relationships can only be healed once they've been broken open and rebuilt. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. How sometimes what seems like betrayal or failure can actually be the beginning of something better. The trick is staying open to that possibility, I replied, even when it would be easier to seek revenge or walk away. Well, I for one am glad you didn't take the easy path, Rachel said, squeezing my hand. Sister landlord. Sister manager, I returned with a smile. As we locked up the building that had transformed from a simple investment into the foundation of our reconciliation, I reflected on the journey we'd taken. The sister who had tried to triple my rent out of spite was now my most trusted ally. The family that had always subtly diminished my choices now sought my advice. And I had evolved from someone with something to prove into someone secure enough to help others, even those who had hurt me, find their own path to redemption. Some might call it karma. Others might see it as justice served. But as I looked at the life and community we'd built from the ashes of old resentments, I recognized it as something more powerful, the transformative potential of choosing growth over grievance, possibility over payback, and the courage to rewrite the story you've been given. Wow, what a journey it's been sharing this story with you all today. I hope my experience with my sister shows that sometimes life's most painful moments can lead to unexpected growth and reconciliation. I'd love to know if you've ever experienced a similar family dynamic or had a moment where standing your ground changed everything. Did justice find its way back in your life too? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this family karma story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It really helps more people find these real-life lessons. And if you want to hear more stories about family dynamics, surprising twists, and the healing that can come from difficult confrontations, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I share new stories every week. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Remember, sometimes the most powerful response to mistreatment isn't revenge, it's creating something better from the experience. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.